It's time for another Trope Count, where we count all the traditional small-town, hot cocoa romance tropes in a Hallmark Christmas movie. The goal? Find the movie that racks up the most tropes. Will it be today's film? Let's find out. A great Hallmark Christmas film must fit the Hallmark feel-good formula. It's a genre of film with repetitive movie tropes that we all love. We will identify the tropes into 4 trope categories: story, character, Christmas, and activity. It's all very scientific, and it's fueled by hot cocoa. Today we take a look at the 2021 Hallmark film My Christmas Family Tree, starring Aimee Teegarden and Andrew Walker. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, a woman who takes a DNA test discovers that she is 1.5% West African, but let's be honest, is mostly Scandinavian, connects with her biological father she never met through a shady DNA testing agency, only to meet a family friend who is looking to be a suitor, his words, while visiting her father's family at Christmas, and falls in love at the end. So take a DNA test, but maybe don't trust the results. Let's count the tropes that make up My Christmas Family Tree. The Nat King Cole song, I'm the Happiest Christmas Tree, plays as the film opens up with the TVG rating box covering up the title of the film. Picking up the picture is Vanessa, played by Aimee Teegarden. You may know her best from the TV show Friday Night Lights as Julie Taylor. Since she was a teenager when the show started, I'm going to count her as a former child star. Vanessa works at an adoption agency called Making Families, and is the only one in the office as she places gifts on her co-workers' desks. She quickly pretends to be on the phone when they arrive at work, but they know who the gifts are from. Vanessa helps place children in foster homes, which hopefully leads to an adoption. A newly formed family she just helped comes in to thank her by giving her a card and singing We Wish You a Merry Christmas, which I'm going to count as caroling.
Yes, we wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas.
She politely declines an invitation to Christmas, as they should celebrate for the first time as a new family. She arrives at her apartment, greeted by her dog Mickey. Her friend Dee shows up and tells her she got the results from the family DNA test they did together. Vanessa asks,
"Anything juicy?"
Dee found out that she's a little less South Asian than she thought, and is 4% Brazilian as she rolls her R's.
Brazilian.
I mean, that explains a lot.
What does that explain, and why is that juicy? Vanessa checks her results and finds out that she is 50% Scandinavian, 27% British Irish, 16% Spanish, 5.5% French, and 1.5% West African.
Percent West African. That's kind of cool.
That is very cool.
She gets an alert that she has a paternal match, her biological father. Her father is Richard Hendricks, 54 years old, and lives in Barrington, Connecticut.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
They stalk him on Hallmark Facebook and discover that he has a family. Dee encourages her to contact him with a short and sweet message. Hi, I am your daughter. Concerned he may not respond, Dee tells him that if he doesn't, that is on him and not you. Richard is busy hanging icicle lights when he gets a message.
Everyone, welcome Trisha to the Maury Show. Okay. When it comes to 32-year-old Vanessa, Richard, you are the father.
Shocked, he falls off the ladder. Unsure what to do next, he looks in on his family and is now trying to figure out how he will tell them. The next day, Richard is alone with his wife Pauline, who's concerned with the condition of his lawn Santa. Richard tells her that it's held together mostly by duct tape, and she tells him maybe it's time to retire Santa, and while he doesn't say tradition, he can't part with it as a decoration has always been in the family. Speaking of family, Richard reminds her of the DNA test they took last year, and then shows his wife the message from Vanessa. Pauline encourages Richard to call Vanessa, and they have a very awkward conversation with Richard telling Vanessa he is her father.
I am your father.
Casually, they ask each other, "How you doing?" After an uncomfortable pause, she jokes by asking him,
So, where have you been all my life?
That was a joke.
They share a love for making bad jokes when they are uncomfortable, and admit the conversation is awkward and agree to meet in person. They meet at the big Christmas tree in the park near her apartment. She goes for a handshake, but Richard's a hugger. Singing to the Christmas choir in the park, Vanessa is impressed that Richard knows the lyrics to Good King Wenceslas. He replies that his family are avid carolers and offers to buy her a hot cocoa. Richard asks about her mother, and Vanessa mentions she passed away a long time ago. He refers to her as Trish, but she corrects him and says her name was Patty. You would think that this would be something that they would both want to clear up, but they don't. He invites her to spend the Christmas holiday with him and her new family. Richard offers her to ride up with a family friend Christopher, and she can bring her dog. That morning, she meets up with Christopher, played by Andrew Walker. Right away, Vanessa and her friend Dee like what they see, so much that Dee elbows Vanessa and asks if she is sure he is not related. Chris takes her suitcase and asks what's in it, gold? Vanessa makes a bad joke of yes with her frankincense and myrrh. Chris tells a story about how he used to ask his mom why the wise men brought Frankenstein to meet baby Jesus.
You know, I used to ask my mom why the wise men used to bring Frankenstein to the baby Jesus. It just seemed like an odd gift.
Chris was a dumb kid. Vanessa comments that it would have made the nativity a whole lot more interesting. Fact check. This is not Frankenstein. This is Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein is the name of the doctor who created the monster. In the car, Vanessa tells Chris the story of how she discovered Richard was her biological father. Chris reassures her that the family is amazing and she shouldn't worry about it. They stop at a restaurant for 2 peppermint eggnogs brought by a waiter played by a clean-shaven Tyler Hines. In 2022, a number of the Hallmark Christmas movies featured small cameos from Hallmark stars. It's a fun new twist that Hallmark has done, and I'm all for it, so much that I am adding it as a new character trope. They arrive at Richard's house, and Chris assures her that if Richard had known she existed, he would have looked for her. Her life will change knowing Richard and the family, because his life has. Richard welcomes them and introduces Vanessa to her new siblings, Caitlin, Aiden, and Amelia. The kids are quiet, but Pauline comments on how beautiful she is and gives her a big giant hug. Aiden asks the hard question,
How can you be our sister? You're a grown-up. Then why are we just meeting her now?
Vanessa is impressed with Richard's home and how it smells like Christmas, and she compliments how the home is decorated. Richard then shows Vanessa to her room and offers her to join them in the family Christmas activities. She sits on the bed, smiles, and falls backwards, showing how happy she is that she finally has a family. Vanessa joins the family for dinner as they eat the Norwegian Christmas food, pinjot, which are just lamb ribs that have been salted and smoked. It's a tradition for the family to eat around the holidays. Vanessa asks if they often get together for dinner, and then Richard shares a memory that his mom would keep them at the table to practice her English growing up. After dinner, they go outside to turn on the lights outside. Suddenly, the inflatable Santa begins to fall over, and Chris and Richard run to save it with duct tape. They all sit around a fire making s'mores, and she tells Chris this is a magical time. Caitlin asks how her dad met Vanessa's mother. Richard says they met in Providence, but Vanessa was unaware her mom lived in Rhode Island and seems confused. Amelia asks how she could be their sister if they have 2 different moms. Caitlin points out that Vanessa is their half-sister, but Pauline says she doesn't like that term half-sister. Family is family, and you are sisters, and that's it. Back in the house, Vanessa gets a text message from the Family Tree DNA testing company to contact them regarding an urgent matter with the results of her DNA test. She tries calling, but the office is closed. The following day, they go get the family Christmas tree, and Richard tells Vanessa to wear something warm. Well, she listens to her father, wearing a plaid coat, giving us the 3 or more coat tropes. Hallmark queens love their coats, and we point out when they wear more than 3. But I must point out that she only comes to visit with 1 suitcase. That suitcase must be filled with coats. And Frankensteins. Vanessa asks Chris why he spends his Christmas with Richard's family. He tells the story of his parents dying from a car accident on the way to visit him at law school. Because they both died, we're going to count the death trope twice. He was alone at Christmas, and Richard invited him and now visits every year. After the downer of his story, things look bright and shiny as they find the perfect tree. They set up the tree in the living room, and we were about to decorate it when Vanessa notices that Amelia is not around. Something happened at the pageant rehearsal, and Amelia is hiding out. Vanessa helps string popcorn and cranberries and learns that Amelia has stage fright to sing her solo. Vanessa tells her how she worked through anxiety by thinking about how nobody wanted her to fail. Amelia and Vanessa join the rest of the family, and they all begin decorating the tree. Richard asks how Vanessa and her mother would celebrate Christmas. Her biggest Christmas memory is that it was just her and her mom, and they would go see the Rockefeller tree and have a nice dinner. Chris comes in with a box. He had found the handmade ornaments the kids made. The family celebrates another Norwegian tradition by hanging the julekever, which are small heart-shaped paper baskets filled with candy and nuts that they hang on the tree. Amelia finds the star, and Richard picks her up and puts it on top, and they clap. Sharing in the joy, Pauline puts her arm around Vanessa. That evening, Vanessa is looking at the tree and Chris joins her. She tells him she knows now why he comes back every year. Suddenly, Vanessa realizes she doesn't have any gifts. Chris volunteers to take her out, but confirms that it's not a date, just shopping. And she agrees, and they are so uncomfortable, they go to bed, of course, separately. In the morning, Chris tells Richard he is handling the Vanessa situation very well. And Richard says she makes it easy, but does question that Vanessa didn't know her mom lived in Providence, and the woman he knew was named Trish. But Vanessa only knows her as Pat. But the DNA test matches, so Richard shouldn't be worried. On their non-date shopping venture, they discuss what to buy the kids. And then Chris suggested they go ice skating, where the non-date leads to a lot of hand-holding. Chris knows what's up. As they finish up skating and shopping, Vanessa's phone rings. It's the family DNA testing agency calling her to discuss the mix-up of her results. Not wanting to hear any bad news, she ignores the call and will deal with it later. They get back to the house and the family is in the yard. The inflatable Santa has collapsed for the final time. The family is devastated until Vanessa reveals that she bought Richard even a bigger inflatable Santa as an early Christmas present. The kids cheer as they decorate for Christmas. Once inflated, the Santa is huge and it's glorious. The family then decides to decorate gingerbread houses. Chris and Vanessa team up together, but Chris uses way too much icing. This reminds Vanessa of a Christmas memory when her and her mom would make gingerbread houses out of graham crackers. Chris tries to counter by telling a memory about his dad playing gigs as a musician around Christmas. He was able to go to all of the fancy private parties.
We even went to the fancy private Christmas parties.
It's not a competition, Chris. Richard asks Vanessa if she has any photos of her mom. She has one of her holding her as a baby, but she lost all the others in a flood. Everything she owned was ruined. Back in her room, Vanessa listens to a message from the DNA place, confirming her fear that her test got switched with another Vanessa Hall. She calls Dee, freaking out about how they made a mistake and that Richard and the family aren't really related to her. Dee gives her advice to wait to tell them after Christmas. The next morning, Vanessa has breakfast with the family. Caitlin asks her dad if she can go to the winter dance after Amelia's solo. Hoping to bond, Vanessa volunteers to take Caitlin shopping for a new dress. They go to a store that sells, and I quote, totally cute stuff.
This store has some really cute stuff.
Totally.
Where Caitlin tells Vanessa about a boy named Eli that she has a crush on. But I quote again, they are totally in the friend zone.
His name's Eli, but we're totally in the friend zone.
Vanessa gives her advice to ask him to dance to a slow song and lock eyes with him and feel the spark. Caitlin points out that is how Chris looks at Vanessa. Returning to the house, Vanessa asks to talk to Richard. He wants to talk to her as well. Even though he's a grown man, he is nervous about telling his mother about her. Turns out his mom was pretty open-minded, but surprised. Chris interrupts, asking how was dress shopping. Vanessa says that Caitlin is going to look beautiful, and Richard mentions that he's not ready for a young suitor to come around. Chris points out the fact that he still calls them young suitors, that he is definitely not ready. That night at the pageant, Pauline just makes it in time to hear Amelia sing Away in the Manger. Unfortunately, the song is not in sync with the actress's mouth, and it's a very glaring editing issue. After it is over, Vanessa tells Amelia that she will be on Broadway. Richard searches for a picture of Vanessa's mom. Chris, who seems to always interrupt, asks Richard if it's weird he likes Vanessa. Surprised that Chris doesn't understand his attraction to girls, Richard asks him to clarify if Chris is asking to be a young suitor to his daughter.
Yeah, I think I am.
Chris says he is.
Yeah.
And Richard says nothing will make him happier. It's a little weird that Chris would ask her since Richard just met her as well. The next morning, Vanessa discovers that the entire family has arrived while she was sleeping. Richard introduces everybody to her. This includes her cousins, aunts, and uncles. She then gets to meet his mother, Helen, her grandmother. She hugs her and welcomes her to the family. Helen made lefse, a family recipe of the Norwegian bread made from potatoes. Vanessa takes a very small bite and likes it. Helen asks if Vanessa has ever been to Norway and tells her that she would make the traditional dish of lutefisk, but Richard will not let her because it would make the entire house smell like a fish market. Richard proclaims it is time to make snowmen, but Kaylin corrects him that it is now proper to say snow people. The entire family goes out in the front yard and makes snow people, and Vanessa does some really bad snow puns.
Looks just like Richard, huh?
I would say there is no denying it.
Suddenly, a large snowball fight breaks out in the front yard. That night, Vanessa enters the kitchen where Richard and Pauline are baking cookies. She thanks them for having her. She asks how the two met, and they tell the story about how she was his nurse after an accident he had watching hockey. She then asks Richard how he met her mother. It's not much of a story. It was a windy day and Richard's hat blew off and she is here today. Some story, Richard. She tries to tell Richard about the DNA mix-up, but Pauline interrupts that Amelia just spilled her hot chocolate. The entire family goes caroling and Vanessa tries again to tell Richard about the test, but changes her mind and tells him she is a bad singer. During the caroling, Chris asks her out on a date for New Year's Eve. He tells her to say yes because he is a lawyer.
I don't know, maybe we can spend New Year's together?
I mean, I want to say yes,
Say yes. That was very lawyer of me.
Richard then gives a speech about finding his daughter with such a gift. Vanessa was the missing part of his family that they didn't know was missing. The important tree in our lives is the family tree. They then sing, "Oh, Christmas Tree." When they get home, Richard announces that they will take the traditional Christmas family photo. Overwhelmed that she may not be part of the family, she runs upstairs, packs all her coats, and texts her friend Dee to come get her. Vanessa is hesitant to take the traditional family photo. She takes the first photo, but proclaims that she can't be in the photo since she isn't Richard's daughter, and the camera flash goes off.
I'm not Richard's daughter.
I really want to see that second photo. She pulls Richard and Chris aside and tells them about the mixed-up DNA test results. She tells Richard that the other Vanessa is the luckiest girl in the world. She apologizes and Chris asks why she didn't say anything. She just couldn't tell them because she was so happy. Because she isn't Richard's daughter, I'm going to count the mistaken identity trope. I mean, because there's no way a DNA testing company could make that kind of mistake, right? Right?
Richard, you are not the father.
Dee comes to the door to pick up Vanessa, and in the funniest scene in the film, Richard's brother answers and says, "Let me guess, you're the real daughter."
Let me guess. You're the real daughter.
No.
Vanessa thanks everybody and apologizes again. Amelia, upset, cries out, "She's not my sister now," and runs upstairs to wave goodbye to Vanessa from the window. After she leaves, Richard tells the family that he does have a daughter, and that it was a very weird day. They don't care if Vanessa isn't family. She's welcome here, but that is her decision to make. Chris is upset and can't stop thinking about Vanessa. He points out that she brought presents for the entire family, even him. Richard tells him to open the gift Vanessa got him. It's a nativity set with a Frankenstein monster action figure, a callback to when they first met.
You know, I used to ask my mom why the wise men used to bring Frankenstein to the baby Jesus. It just seemed like an odd gift.
Richard tells him to go see her and tell her that even though she isn't related to them, she's welcome here. Vanessa arrives home and Dee invites her over to be with her parents, but Vanessa politely declines. She's going to decompress. She started to see herself in Richard and the kids, and Dee asks, "What about Chris?" Vanessa thinks that ship has sailed. Meanwhile, Richard finds a photo of Vanessa's mom and discovers that on the back it was signed Patricia. Richard knew her as Trish, and Vanessa knew her as Patty. He shows the family, and they realize that Vanessa is his daughter, and she even looks like Vanessa. Because she is his daughter, we can take off the mistaken identity trope that I counted earlier. They all head to New York to get her, and Pauline doesn't even question Richard why he still has a photo of his ex-girlfriend. The family begins a carol outside Vanessa's apartment, singing Silent Night. Vanessa comes down and Richard shows her the photo. She confirms the photo is her mother, and Richard gives her a hug.
Richard, you are the father.
They all come up to her apartment and Chris knocks and has a treat. She apologizes to Chris for not saying anything sooner. She was falling in love with the family, and they wave as they awkwardly watch them declare their love for each other. We then get the final kiss as Amelia looks on, pretty grossed out. They open gifts on Christmas morning, and Chris gives Vanessa a framed photo they took last night. She begins to tear up and says, "It's my family." She looks around at her newfound family, a stocking with her name on it on the fireplace, and Vanessa smiles. So how many tropes are in a Christmas family tree? Let's count them. Looking at the numbers, the film where an adoption specialist who learns that she is mostly Northern European, except 1.5% of her, connects with her biological father who she never met, agrees to spend Christmas with him and his family, catches a ride with a family friend Christopher, spelled with a K, is served eggnog by Tyler Hines, instantly loves her new family, only to learn that a DNA testing company messed up and Richard is not her father, decides to keep that a secret, goes tree shopping, ice skating, learns Norwegian traditions, and eventually admits to the family that she is not related to them, leaves in an embarrassment only to discover that her father is her father after he finds a photo of her mom, gives Chris a Frankenstein monster action figure, and falls in love at the end. If we add up the different categories, My Christmas Family Tree has a total of 34 tropes. As absurd as My Christmas Family Tree is, I really do enjoy this movie. Yes, the movie has some glaring plot holes. For example, why doesn't Vanessa and Richard discuss her mother more? Initially, they clearly know her by different names. No red flags there. Then the DNA testing agency called Vanessa to let her know that the DNA got mixed up with another Vanessa, but they don't call Richard. In the end, we learn that they were wrong about the mix-up, but how does that happen? Before the final twist, I fully expected the family would still consider her family even if they weren't related. To me, that would have made a much better ending. Aimee Teegarden is still one of my favorite Hallmark stars, and this is her best Hallmark film and one of my favorites from the 2021 Christmas. At the end, when she looks at the photo and around at her new family, she instantly sells it in her eyes and her smile. And I have to admit that I felt something, but I didn't cry. Andrew Walker gets to play another lawyer in this film. And why do they keep casting him as lawyers? I mean, does he look like one? Luckily, his job has nothing to do with this film. If there is ever a sequel, I fully expect to see him represent Vanessa in her lawsuit against a DNA testing company.
Kaboom! You've been lawyered.
Full of traditions, dead family members, and of course multiple code tropes, My Christmas Family Tree has a huge amount of Christmas activities. We also get our very first cameo trope with Andrew Walker's 3 Wives and a Maybe co-star, Tyler Hines. Before we see where My Christmas Family Tree ranks, I have to make a correction from the last video. In the last trope count, I incorrectly added wrong and A Very Merry Mix-Up has 29 tropes, not 28. I'm sorry. Math is hard. That means that My Christmas Family Tree fits nicely between A Cookie Cutter Christmas and The Northern Lights of Christmas with 34 tropes. Did I miss any tropes? If so, tell me in the comments below. Will the next film rank higher? We will see with the next trope count featuring the Mallory Jansen and Tyler Hines Hallmark film on the 12th date of Christmas from 2020. How will that movie rank? Click on the subscribe button if you want to be alerted when that episode is released if you want to find out. I'm the Christmas aficionado, and remember, stay off the naughty list. Shocked, he falls off the ladder.
Hello up there! I seem to have fallen down. I'm still alive, but I'm very badly injured. I think my legs might be broken, but I'll try to stand up. Ah! Yes, they are broken. Perhaps you could toss me a Band-Aid or some antibacterial cream. I'm in an extraordinarily large amount of pain. The bone has gone through the skin. I fear it might be gangrenous. The wound is beginning to smell a little like almonds, which is not good. Please? No one? I'll try the other leg. Oh!